The sky over New Haven burned red, not the soft red of sunset, but the angry, hungry red of fire and plasma. From orbit, the Kethari warships hung like black teeth against the stars, silent and cruel. Below, the colony cities, once bright with lights, laughter, and life, were being erased. People ran. They screamed. They called for loved ones, but the orbital strikes came too fast. One moment, a schoolyard full of children playing under twin suns. The next, a crater of melted stone and silence. The Kethari did not warn them. They did not negotiate. They simply decided humanity was not worthy to live among the stars, and so they acted. 2 million souls vanished in less than an hour. The attack was recorded by a lone surveillance drone drifting near the edge of the system. It had no weapons, no voice, only eyes. It watched as the Kethari flagship, the Dreadmaw, fired its main cannon into New Haven's capital. The footage would later be sent across human space, carried by emergency beacons that blinked into the void like dying stars. On Earth, the news hit like a hammer. In Chicago, Leo Hayes stood in his small apartment staring at the wall screen. His hands trembled. On the screen, a reporter's voice cracked as she described the loss. Then came the video, grainy, horrifying, real. Leo saw the skyline of Havenport where his sister lived, where she worked as a schoolteacher, where she sent him birthday messages every year, even when he was stationed light years away. Now there was only smoke and ruin. He did not cry, not then. He just turned off the screen and sat in the dark for a long time. Across the ocean in Madrid, Dr. Maya Ruiz watched the same footage in a quiet university lab. She had just returned from a diplomatic mission to Oryx Prime, where she'd spent months trying to convince the Galactic Council that humanity deserved equal standing. She'd argued, pleaded, even compromised. And now this. Her friends on New Haven, scientists, doctors, fellow linguists, were gone. Wiped out like insects under a boot, she felt sick, not just with grief, but with shame. She had trusted the system. She had believed that rules, treaties, and councils could protect the innocent. Now she knew better. The United Earth Defense Coalition called an emergency meeting. Representatives from every nation gathered in Geneva, their faces grim. Some demanded immediate war. Others warned of the Kethari's overwhelming firepower. The Kethari Dominion controlled over 30 star systems. Their fleets were vast. Their warriors were bred for battle. Humanity had only recently joined the galactic community, still seen as young, soft, and untested. What could Earth possibly do? The Galactic Council issued a statement 2 days later. It deeply regretted the tragic loss of life and condemned all acts of unprovoked aggression. But it stopped there. No sanctions, no military response, no justice. The Council's logic was cold and clear. New Haven was a human colony outside protected space. The Kethari claimed it was a preemptive strike against a potential threat. And since humanity had no formal treaty guaranteeing its safety, the Council would not intervene. The message was clear. You are on your own. On Earth, protests erupted in every major city. People held candles, signs, photos of the lost. But the anger did not fade. It grew, it hardened. In shipyards hidden beneath the moon's surface, engineers began working double shifts. In labs buried under the Rockies, scientists reviewed old defense plans. Something was stirring, not just grief, but resolve. Leo Hayes received a message one evening, encrypted, official. It asked him to report to Lunar Command within 48 hours. He didn't hesitate. He packed a single bag, left his apartment key on the table, and walked out without looking back. Maya Ruiz was summoned too. Not to a military base, but to a secure research facility near Reykjavik. There she met General Daniel Cruz, a man with tired eyes and a voice like gravel. He didn't offer her tea or small talk. He showed her intercepted Kethari transmissions, coded, brutal, full of pride over New Haven's destruction. We need to understand them, Cruz said. Not just their words. Their thinking. Their weaknesses, Maya nodded. She knew what he was asking. Not just translation, strategy, revenge wrapped in silence. Back on Oryx Prime, the Galactic Council continued its debates. The Xenari ambassador called for measured dialogue. The Veil representative warned against escalating tensions. No one mentioned the 2 million dead. No one asked what humanity might do next. They assumed Earth would mourn, beg, and eventually accept its place at the bottom of the galactic order. They were wrong. Leo arrived on the moon 3 days later. The base was quiet, tense. He was led through corridors lined with engineers and soldiers, all moving with purpose. No one spoke much, but their eyes said everything. In a sealed hangar, he saw it for the first time, the UNS Resolute. Sleek, dark, bristling with weapons unlike anything Earth had built before. It used salvaged Cathary shielding, reverse-engineered plasma cores, and a new kind of drive that bent space without needing alien jump gates. It was fast, it was deadly, and it was human. "They're calling it Project Iron Dawn," said a technician handing Leo a flight suit. "You're the first pilot they've cleared for full simulation." Leo ran his hand along the hull. Cold metal. Warm purpose. He thought of his sister's last message. "Come visit soon. The kids miss your stories." He wouldn't tell stories anymore. He would write a new one. With fire. Meanwhile, Maya sat in a dim room, headphones on, listening to hours of Cathari comms. She noticed something others had missed. Before the attack, Vraxkol, the Cathari commander, had used a specific phrase. "The soft ones will learn silence." It wasn't just a threat. It was a ritual, a declaration of dominance used only before total annihilation. That meant the Cathari saw humanity not as enemies, but as prey, and prey, Maya thought, never fights back. But humans were not prey. Not anymore. As Earth's nights grew longer and its people quieter, a new kind of storm gathered in the shadows. Not loud, not flashy, just certain. The galaxy had ignored humanity's pain. It had dismissed their voices. Now it would learn what happened when a quiet species finally roared. But for now there was only silence, and preparation, and the slow, steady beat of a planet that had decided it would never be helpless again. Part 2. Beneath the dusty surface of the moon's far side, where no Earthlight ever touched, humanity began to build its answer. Deep inside caverns carved by ancient lava flows, engineers and scientists worked around the clock. The air hummed with drills, welders, and the low thrum of fusion reactors powering the largest secret project Earth had ever known. They called it Project Iron Dawn, though no official record used that name. To the outside world, the site was listed as Lunar Research Outpost 7. Leo Hayes spent his days inside simulators that tested not just his flying skills, but his mind. The UN's Resolute was unlike any ship before it. Its controls responded to thought as much as touch, using neural links that read pilot intent before the command was even spoken. At first, Leo struggled. His reflexes were sharp, but the ship demanded more. Patience instinct, a kind of calm fury. He crashed the simulation 17 times before he finally held the vessel steady through a mock Cathari ambush. On the 18th try, he didn't just survive. He won. General Daniel Cruz watched from the observation deck, arms crossed. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "You're ready," he said later over black coffee in the mess hall. "But the ship is only half the battle. The real weapon is what we do with it." While Leo trained, Maya Ruiz worked in a quiet wing of the same complex, surrounded by walls of sound-dampening foam and flickering translation screens. She had brought her own notes from Oryx Prime, along with every scrap of Cathari communication Earth had ever intercepted. Now, with better decryption tools and a team of young linguists, she began to see patterns. The Cathari didn't just speak in commands. Their language carried rhythm, pride, even poetry, especially before battle. They believed war was sacred. To strike without warning was not cowardice to them. It was purity. And they always struck the same way. Fast, total, and followed by a broadcast meant to shame the survivors. Maya realized something important. The Cathari expected fear. They fed on it. If Earth responded with panic or pleas, they would see it as proof of weakness. But if Earth struck back, clean, precise, and silent, they might not understand it at all. She shared this with Cruz. He listened, then nodded slowly. "Then we don't just hit them," he said. "We confuse them. We make them doubt their own strength." Above ground, the world continued as if nothing had changed. News channels talked about crop yields, sports, and celebrity gossip. But in the shadows, nations pooled resources. Old rivals, China, Russia, Brazil, India, the United States, set aside decades of tension. For the first time in history, Earth's militaries shared everything: data, tech, even personnel. No flags flew over Project Iron Dawn. Only one symbol: A simple circle with a single line through it, the ancient human sign for enough. The Resolute grew day by day. Its hull was layered with quantum-absorbing plates that bent sensor beams. Its weapons drew power from compressed stellar cores, small enough to fit in a cargo bay but strong enough to melt a moon's surface. And its drive, called the Helios Fold, allowed it to jump across light years without leaving a trace. No alien gate required, no signal to track. Just vanish, appear, strike, and vanish again. Leo met the rest of the fleet's core crew during a midnight briefing. There was Priya Mehta, a navigation genius who could plot fold jumps through gravitational storms. Jamal Wright, a weapons officer who once disabled a pirate frigate with a single well-placed torpedo. And Elena Torres, the ship's engineer, who spoke to machines like they were old friends. None of them had lost family on New Haven, but all of them carried the same quiet anger. "We're not here to start a war," Cruz told them. "We're here to end one before it spreads. The Ketheri think we're weak. Let them keep thinking that, until it's too late." Meanwhile, the Galactic Council sent observers. 3 of them arrived at Lunar Command under diplomatic clearance, demanding to know what Earth was building. Cruz met them in a sterile conference room. He showed them outdated schematics of mining drones and fuel depots. "We're expanding our civilian infrastructure," he said calmly. Nothing more. The lead observer, a tall Zinari named Kalen, narrowed his multifaceted eyes. "Your energy signatures suggest otherwise. And your pilots are training for combat, not cargo runs." Cruz didn't flinch. "Every species has the right to defend itself, even the young ones." Kalen left without another word, but before his shuttle lifted off, he turned to Cruz and said, "The Council watches. Do not force our hand." Cruz watched the ship disappear into the stars. "We already have," he muttered. Back in her lab, Maya made a breakthrough. She found a flaw in Kethari fleet coordination. Their command ship sent encrypted pulses every 6 hours to confirm fleet positions. The code changed daily, but the timing never did. If someone could jam that pulse, even for 10 seconds, the entire Kethari network would go blind, just long enough for a strike to slip through. She tested the theory in a simulation. It worked. She brought the data to Cruz. He read it twice, then called an emergency meeting. Within hours, the plan began to take shape. Not a full-scale invasion, not a desperate last stand. A single surgical blow deep in Ketheri space aimed not at soldiers but at pride. Leo was told the target, Kether Prime, the Ketheri homeworld. Not to destroy it, but to silence it. To show them that Earth could reach their heart and walk away untouched. He didn't ask why. He just nodded. Training intensified. The crew ran drills until their hands blistered and their eyes burned. They practiced folding in and out of simulated systems, dodging phantom patrols, hitting mock command towers with pinpoint accuracy. They learned to move like ghosts. One night, after a long session, Leo sat alone in the observation lounge, staring at Earth hanging in the black sky, blue, fragile, beautiful. He thought of his sister again, not with sadness now, but with purpose. She had believed in kindness. In teaching, in building. He would honor that by making sure no one else's sister had to die for being kind. Maya visited him there. She didn't speak at first, just stood beside him watching the planet turn. "They'll never expect us to go straight for their capital," she finally said. "No," Leo replied, "because they think we're afraid." "We were," she admitted. "But fear doesn't build ships like the Resolute. Hope does. And justice." In the weeks that followed, final systems were tested. Supplies were loaded. Families were told their loved ones were on a long-term deep space survey mission. No goodbyes, no fanfare, just quiet preparation. The Galactic Council heard rumors. Some member species whispered that Earth was arming itself. Others laughed it off. "Humans barely understand warp theory," one ambassador scoffed. They wouldn't last an hour in real combat. Earth said nothing, and in the hidden shipyards under the moon, the Resolute powered up for the first time. Its engines glowed blue, then white, then vanished into a shimmering fold of space. The test was perfect. Cruz stood on the command deck watching the feed. He turned to his aide and said just 2 words. "It's time." Far away on Kethar Prime, Vraxkol celebrated his victory over New Haven with a feast of conquered species. He did not know that a small, silent ship had just been born in the dark, and that it carried not just weapons, but the weight of 2 million souls. Earth was no longer waiting for permission to exist. It was ready to remind the galaxy what humanity truly was. Not soft, not weak but patient, and when pushed too far, unstoppable. Part 3. The UNS Resolute folded into Cathari space without a sound. One moment it was drifting near the edge of neutral territory. The next it hung in the void just beyond the outer sensor net of Cathar Prime. No alarms rang. No patrols scrambled. The Cathari had never imagined an enemy could appear so deep inside their domain without using their jump gates. They had built their empire on the belief that only they mastered the stars. They were wrong. Leo Hayes sat in the command chair, hands resting lightly on the controls. His breathing was slow, steady. Around him the crew moved with quiet precision. Priya Mehta monitored gravitational tides, ensuring their position stayed hidden in the shadow of a dead moon. Jamal Wright ran final checks on the plasma cannons, his fingers dancing over glowing panels. Elena Torres whispered to the ship's core, making sure the Helios fold drive stayed cool and ready for escape. Maya Ruiz stood near the comm station, her eyes fixed on a screen showing intercepted Cathari fleet signals. She watched the clock. In 3 minutes the command pulse would fire, the daily check-in that tied every Cathari ship to its central network. When it did, she would send a burst of corrupted data through a captured relay drone they'd planted weeks earlier. It would look like a routine signal. But for 10 seconds every Cathari ship in the system would see only static. 2 minutes, she said softly. Leo nodded. No orders were needed. They had run this drill 100 times. Outside, Cathar Prime loomed, a world of jagged black mountains, crimson seas, and cities built from the bones of conquered species. Towering spires pulsed with stolen energy. Orbital platforms bristled with weapons, all pointed outward, toward the edges of their empire. None faced inward. Why would they? No enemy had ever reached this far. The Cathari believed their heart was safe. They were about to learn otherwise. 1 minute, Maya said. Leo closed his eyes for just a second. He thought of Havenport, of his sister's classroom, of the silence that followed the bombing. Then he opened his eyes and said, "Ready weapons, silent mode." Jamal tapped a sequence. The Resolute's cannons hummed to life, but no heat bloom gave them away. The ship's quantum shielding absorbed every trace of energy leakage. To Cathari sensors, if they were even looking, the Resolute was just another rock drifting in the dark. 30 seconds. Maya's fingers hovered over the trigger. She didn't feel fear. Only focus. This wasn't revenge. It was balance. 10, 9, 8. The Cathari command pulse fired. Maya sent the jam. For 10 seconds, the entire Cathari defense grid went blind. "Go," Leo said. The Resolute surged forward, silent and fast. It slipped between orbital platforms like a shadow through trees. Priya guided it through blind spots in the patrol routes, gaps Maya's research had revealed. They passed within a kilometer of a Cathari destroyer, close enough to see the warriors moving on its deck. None looked up. They reached geosynchronous orbit above the capital city, Vrakthol. Below, millions of Cathari gathered in grand arenas, celebrating their latest conquests. At the center of the city stood the command spire, a black tower where Vraxkol ruled. "Target locked," Jamal said. "Fire the EMP," Leo ordered. Not a bomb, not a missile, just a pulse, a single focused burst of electromagnetic energy, tuned to disrupt artificial systems but harmless to living tissue. It washed over the planet like an invisible wave. Lights died, screens went black, power grids collapsed. The great spires fell silent. The orbital platforms froze in place. Even the warships in dry dock lost control, but no one was hurt. No buildings fell. No fires burned, only silence. Then, as the Cathari scrambled in confusion, Leo activated the broadcast system. He didn't speak in Earth's language. Maya had prepared the message in perfect Cathari, using the same tone, rhythm, and ritual phrasing Vraxkol had used before destroying New Haven. "You are unworthy of sharing the stars with humanity." The words echoed across every open channel, military, civilian, even the private comms of Cathari nobles. For a moment, the entire planet stopped. Then chaos erupted. Alarms finally blared, but too late. The Resolute was already folding out. Priya punched the coordinates. Space bent. Light twisted. And the ship vanished, leaving behind only static and stunned silence. On the bridge, no one cheered. No one smiled. They had done what they came to do. Back on Earth, news of the strike spread within minutes. Not through official channels, but through pirate relays, smuggler nets, and rebel broadcasts across the galaxy. Footage of the darkened Cathari capital, paired with the chilling message, went viral among oppressed species. Some wept, others laughed. Many began to hope. The Cathari Dominion reacted with fury. Vraxcol ordered every available ship to hunt down the attackers, but there was nothing to track. No debris, no energy trail, no signature. It was as if Earth's ship had never been there. The humiliation cut deeper than any wound. In the days that followed, Cathari patrols doubled. Their fleets grew nervous, jumpy. They started scanning their own systems for hidden threats. Trust among their commanders eroded. How could an enemy strike their heart and leave no trace? Was it sabotage, treason, or something worse, something they couldn't understand? On Oryx Prime, the Galactic Council erupted. Ambassadors shouted over each other. The Xenari demanded Earth be punished for reckless aggression. The Orathi, long oppressed by the Cathari, remained silent, but their eyes gleamed with something like admiration. No one could prove Earth was responsible. There was no evidence, only the message and the undeniable fact that Cathar Prime had gone dark for exactly 6 hours before slowly coming back online. Maya watched the Council's emergency session from a secure feed in Lunar Command. She saw the fear in the faces of those who had once dismissed humanity. They were realizing something terrible. Earth was no longer the student. It had become the teacher. Leo stood beside her. He looked tired but calm. "Do you think they'll come after us now?" he asked. "Maybe," Maya said, "but they'll think twice." And that's all we needed. General Cruz entered the room. He carried no reports, no orders, just a quiet nod. "You gave them more than a strike," he said. "You gave them doubt. And doubt is the first step toward fear." In the weeks that followed, strange things began to happen. Cathari supply lines were ambushed by unknown forces. Rebel cells on occupied worlds grew bolder. Even neutral species started asking Earth for protection, but Earth said nothing. It did not boast. It did not explain. It simply waited, because the message had been sent. Not with fire, but with silence. Not with rage, but with precision. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the Resolute drifted, ready to fold again if needed. The galaxy had learned one truth that day. Humanity did not need permission to defend itself. And when it chose to act, it did so not with noise but with finality. Odium Part 4. News of the strike on Cathar Prime spread faster than any ship could fly. It traveled through data streams, smuggler whispers, and rebel radio bursts, carried on the breath of a galaxy that had long been afraid to speak against the Cathari Dominion. Within days, every species from the icy moons of Vale to the desert hives of Zynar knew what had happened. Earth had gone silent, but its actions screamed louder than any war cry. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Not the usual slow gathering of diplomats sipping nutrient tea and debating trade tariffs, but a true crisis meeting. The great chamber on Oryx Prime filled with representatives from over 50 species, their forms as varied as their fears. Some stood on many legs, others floated in fluid-filled suits, a few communicated only through colored light pulses. All of them were unsettled. For weeks they had treated humanity as a child, loud, emotional, and naive. Now that child had walked into the den of the galaxy's fiercest predator and slapped its face without leaving a fingerprint. The Xenari ambassador, Kalen, was the first to speak. His voice buzzed with controlled anger. "This act of aggression cannot go unanswered. Earth has violated galactic neutrality laws. They struck a sovereign world without declaration. The Orathi delegate, a massive being with a shell like polished obsidian, pulsed a slow, deep blue. Sovereign? Cathar Prime has burned 100 colonies. Where was your outrage then?" Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Vale representative, crystalline and fragile-looking, chimed softly. "The method matters. Earth used no weapons of mass destruction. No lives were taken. Only pride was wounded. That is the point," said the insectoid envoy from the Grix hive. "They showed they could kill everyone, and chose not to. That is more terrifying than any bomb." The debate raged for hours. Some demanded Earth be stripped of all off-world rights. Others quietly suggested that perhaps humanity had finally earned a seat at the table, not as a petitioner, but as a power. But Earth sent no one to defend itself. No diplomats. No apologies. Not even a statement. Only silence. That silence became the loudest thing in the room. On Earth, life continued. Markets opened. Children went to school. Farmers planted crops. But beneath the surface, everyone knew something had changed. People stood a little taller. Voices grew firmer. When alien traders landed in orbital ports, they no longer spoke with condescension. They asked questions. They listened. In Lunar Command, Leo Hayes and his crew rested. The Resolute was docked, undergoing maintenance, but its crew knew they might be called again. They didn't talk much about what they'd done. There was no need. They had seen the footage from Cathar Prime, the confusion, the panic, the way the mighty spires went dark. They had done their job. Maya Ruiz, however, was called to Oryx Prime, not as a representative, but as an observer. General Cruz insisted. "Let them see a human face," he said. "Not a soldier, not a general, just a person who understands their language and their fear." She arrived alone, wearing simple gray clothing, no insignia, no weapons. The council guard scanned her twice, as if expecting hidden tech. She offered no resistance. Inside the chamber, all eyes turned to her as she took her seat in the observer's gallery. She did not fidget, did not glare. She simply sat, calm and present like a stone in a rushing river. When the Zenari ambassador turned to her and demanded to know if Earth planned more attacks, she did not rise. She just looked at him and said, "We waited for justice. We received none. We acted. Now you decide what that means." Her words hung in the air like smoke. No one knew how to respond. The session ended without a vote. Without a resolution. Without anything but more silence. Back on Earth, scientists and engineers kept working. Project Iron Dawn was no longer just one ship. More vessels were being built, smaller, faster, designed not for conquest but for protection. Human colonies on the edge of known space began installing new defense grids, all made from Earth's own tech. No alien parts needed. The Cathari, meanwhile, were unraveling. Their fleets grew paranoid. Patrols fired on shadows. Commanders accused each other of betrayal. Frax Cole himself disappeared from public view, rumored to be under house arrest by his own war council. The Dominion's grip on its outer systems weakened. Rebellions flared on 3 worlds. One colony even declared independence, flying a flag stitched with human and native symbols side by side. The galaxy watched, stunned. No one had expected this. Not from humanity. On Oryx Prime, Maya stayed longer than planned. She walked the quiet halls, spoke with junior diplomats from minor species, listened more than she talked. Many of them thanked her, not for the strike, but for giving them hope. "We thought no one could stand up to the Cathari," said a young Vale aide. "Now we know someone did." She didn't correct him. She didn't say it was about justice, not hope. She just nodded. Weeks passed. The council remained deadlocked. Sanctions against Earth were proposed, then quietly dropped when 3 member species threatened to withdraw in protest. Trade routes once closed to human ships slowly reopened, not out of kindness but caution. Earth had proven it could reach anyone, anywhere, and it had shown mercy when it didn't have to. That made it more dangerous than any brute force empire. Leo received a message one evening. Just 2 words, stand by. He didn't ask why. He just suited up and walked to the hangar. The Resolute gleamed under the lunar lights, ready, but no orders came. Instead, a new signal arrived, from a distant system near the Cathari border. A human freighter, the Aurora Dawn, had been boarded by pirates. But these weren't ordinary raiders. They flew Cathari-marked ships, though their comms were scrambled. Maya analyzed the data. "It's a test," she told Cruz. "They want to see if we'll protect our own." Cruz didn't hesitate. "Send the Resolute. But no weapons unless fired upon. Show them we defend, not dominate." Leo and his crew launched that night. They folded to the edge of the system, found the freighter drifting, its crew locked in cargo holds. The pirate ships circled like vultures. The Resolute appeared without warning. The pirates panicked. 2 tried to flee. 1 fired. Jamal returned a single warning shot, just enough to melt their engine core. Not their hull. The pirates surrendered. Leo's team rescued the freighter's crew, then left the disabled pirate ships for local authorities to deal with. No executions, no trophies, just rescue and retreat. When the story reached Oryx Prime, even the Zenari fell silent. Earth wasn't building an empire. It was drawing a line. and the galaxy finally understood. Humanity would not be prey. It would not be ignored, but it also would not become the monster it had fought. In the great chamber where once Earth's voice was drowned out by louder, older species, there was now a new kind of quiet. Not the silence of dismissal, but the silence of respect. And in that silence, something new began to grow. Not fear, but balance. Maya returned to Earth soon after. She didn't go to a parade or a press conference. She went to a small school in Lisbon, where she began teaching again. Only now her lessons included more than language. She taught her students about choice, about strength with restraint, about what it meant to be human in a vast and often cruel universe. And far above in the endless dark, the resolute waited, not for war, but for peace worth protecting. Part 5. The Galactic Council met again, but this time the air was different. No shouting, no frantic debates, just a heavy, thoughtful quiet as representatives from 53 species sat in the great chamber on Oryx Prime. At the center of the room, a single data slate floated, displaying the official offer: full membership for Earth, with voting rights, trade access, and a permanent seat on the Security Conclave. It was everything humanity had asked for years ago, back when they were still begging for a place at the table. But Earth did not accept. Instead, a message arrived from Geneva, signed by every major nation on the planet. It was short, clear, final. Earth declined the offer, not out of pride, but principle. The old system, they said, had failed New Haven. It had failed countless others. Rules written by the strong to protect the strong. Earth wanted no part in that. In its place, humanity proposed something new: the Sol Accord. A pact open to any species, big or small, who believed that the weak deserved protection, not pity. Who believed that justice should not depend on how many warships you owned. The accord would have no council, no hierarchy. Only mutual defense, shared knowledge, and one simple rule: if one member is attacked without cause, all respond. Not with endless war, but with swift, precise action, like the strike on Kethar Prime. The galaxy did not know what to make of it. Some called it naive. Others called it brilliant. Within a month, 3 minor species signed on: the Vale, the Arathi, and the free colonies of the Helios Drift. Within 2 months, 2 former Kethari vassal worlds joined, their leaders tired of living in fear. The Cathari Dominion, now fractured and defensive, issued threats but no attacks. They had learned the hard way that Earth did not bluff. On Earth, life settled into a new rhythm. Not peace exactly, but purpose. Cities rebuilt. Farms flourished. Children played under open skies, unaware of how close their world had come to being erased. But those who remembered carried the lesson forward, not with anger but with care. Leo Hayes returned to Earth after the Resolute's final patrol. He did not seek fame. He bought a small house near the coast of Oregon, where the ocean met the cliffs in a slow, steady dance. Sometimes he taught flight basics to cadets at the Pacific Aerospace Academy. He never spoke about Kethar Prime, but the students listened closely when he said, "Strength is nothing without control." Maya Ruiz stayed in Madrid, back in her university office. She still taught xenolinguistics, but her classes now included ethics, history, and diplomacy. Her students came from Earth and beyond: Vale apprentices, Orathi scholars, even a quiet Kethari exile who wanted to understand how a soft species had changed the galaxy. She never called humanity soft. She called them awake. General Daniel Cruz retired, though no one believed he truly stopped working. He lived in a quiet cabin in the Colorado mountains where he tended a garden and read old books on paper. Visitors came rarely, but when they did, they always left with clearer minds. He never gave interviews. When asked about Project Iron Dawn, he simply said, "We did what we had to. Now it's up to the next ones." The UNS Resolute was decommissioned, not scrapped. It was placed in orbit around Earth, not as a weapon, but as a monument, a reminder. Tourists could visit it on special shuttles, walking its silent halls, touching the command chair where Leo once sat. There were no plaques boasting of victory, only one line etched near the airlock: "We chose to protect, not to conquer." The Cathari Dominion did not collapse overnight, but it shrank. Rebellions grew. Trade partners drifted away. Without the fear that once held their empire together, cracks spread fast. Brexcol was never seen again. Some said he was executed. Others said he vanished into exile, haunted by the silence of a species he had underestimated. The Galactic Council, once the center of all power, found itself less relevant with each passing season. More species turned to the Sol Accord for help, not because it was stronger, but because it was fair. The Accord did not demand tribute or obedience. It asked only for honesty and courage. On Oryx Prime, the Great Chamber grew quieter. Fewer emergency sessions, fewer empty threats. The Zenari ambassador, Kalen, once so loud in his condemnation of Earth, now often sat in silence during meetings, watching the new envoys from Accord worlds speak with calm confidence. He never apologized, but he stopped calling humans children. One evening, as the twin moons of Oryx rose over the spires of the city, Maya stood on a balcony overlooking the council grounds. She had been invited to speak at a memorial for all lost in the New Haven attack. She did not give a speech full of pain. She spoke of responsibility, of how silence can be both a wound and a weapon, of how Earth had learned to use its voice only when it mattered most. Afterward, a young Orathi delegate approached her. "Will Earth ever join the council now?" he asked. Maya smiled faintly. "We already have. Not with a seat, but with an example." Back on Earth, Leo watched the sunset from his porch. The sky turned gold, then purple, then deep blue. He thought of his sister. He hoped she would be proud. Not of the strike, but of what came after. The choice to build something better instead of becoming what they fought. In classrooms, shipyards, farms, and labs across the planet, people worked not for glory but for tomorrow. They knew the galaxy was still dangerous, but they also knew they were no longer alone and no longer helpless. The Sol Accord grew slowly like a tree from a single seed. It had no armies, only allies. No laws, only promises. And at its heart was a simple truth. Strength is not measured in weapons, but in the will to protect others when no one else will. And in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, where once Earth's pleas were ignored, there was now only quiet. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of respect. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy listened when humanity spoke, and trembled not at its rage, but at its restraint. Earth had not sought to rule the stars. It had only asked to stand among them. And in doing so, it had changed everything.